So you mentioned before just different, I guess, addictive behaviors, and I'm kind of just wondering, are we necessarily talking about distinct populations concerning addiction? And a hypothetical situation, you outlaw all casinos with addictive behaviors and other stimulating media such as alcohol, prostitution, etc., things that give you a high. How would these things change? And are people just going to look for new avenues to get a new high? And Paul also mentioned there are 2 states that don't have legalized gambling. So what are the different social effects? What are the different avenues of addiction that are being pursued in those states? Just to kind of broaden the argument a little bit.
You know, in those states, some of the social issues and social costs that you see in states that have gambling are much lower. Nevada leads the country in almost all the issues I talked about: bankruptcy, divorce, suicide, crime, all those things are off the charts in Nevada. Other places like Utah and Hawaii are the 2 states that don't have any gambling, less so.
That's not entirely true. There is gambling in Utah and Hawaii. It's illegal gambling. And it's evidenced by the idea that in both those states there are Gamblers Anonymous meetings. And the folks from Utah just go across the border to Nevada anyway. So there is gambling. It's just not.
Yeah, it's not pure as a driven snow. There's no doubt about it. And that's also one of the arguments that states will make about why they need to bring casinos. And it's what Governor Cuomo's saying. Our New York residents, our dear New York residents, they're traveling down Atlantic City, so we're going to save them the trip down the Jersey Turnpike. Right. Put the casino on the corner. They don't have to go so far. Make it a lot easier. We'll get to keep the money here, and that's going to be good for New York. But the fallacy against that is, I go to Atlantic City, once a year or once a month. I'm not going 4 times a week. But when you put it in my backyard, I'm swinging by every night on my way home from work. So the answer to the fact that some New Yorkers drive to New Jersey or drive up to Connecticut to gamble, the argument that more casinos will solve this problem is just ludicrous. I mean, it's just comical on the face.
Right. So the other question is that a distinct population, people that are just addicted to gambling per se, or are other addictive avenues pursued? That was the
Yeah, people do go across, but this is a really important question. We don't know. And part of the problem about this rush to kind of legalize gambling is why are we going forward with something that we know so little about? All right? This whole thing about legalization of marijuana has happened in the context that it has been shown to be very effective with certain types of pain syndromes, okay? Now, there are all types of issues about what that means then to young, susceptible populations getting access to it. These are very important questions to raise. Personally, as somebody who I used to be very laissez-faire about drugs of abuse and whether they should be legalized or not. Watching what happens with the adolescent population when they get access to this stuff as an adult now has made me very much in favor of restrictions. Okay? If I were to design any single compound that is euphorogenic and does a miracle in terms of messing up working memory long term, I would design THC. It is like phenomenal, and with the way that the way people have developed the marijuana plant to be so potent these days, you can talk about all different types of very intense highs that were not around when I was a teenager growing up. Kids have exposure to incredibly a whole portfolio of different types of marijuana experiences, but the side effect is it really messes up their working memory. A fundamental aspect of what is necessary for them to have any high level of achievement in the future. And so I look at that, just because of that, it needs to be regulated. Now, what does that mean with regard to other compounds? Adolescence, that's a time when the brain is changing very drastically. We don't even know how that reward system works. There's beginning work by a fellow named Jim Bjork down at the National Institute of Alcohol and Alcohol Abuse, NAAA. He's also a program officer at NIDA. He's published some of the first work doing neuroimaging of the reward system in adolescence. It works completely differently. We have no idea how it goes from its early state through adolescence to become what is in the adult stage where we talk about these reward circuits. and we don't understand the susceptibilities they have. We do know that the brain maturation is a prolonged piece. I mean, most women will tell most men that they have a prolonged adolescence. It's really true. And you take a look at how long the myelination continues in the male brain. It's basically petering off around age 40. Okay? I mean, I have friends of mine, female colleagues of mine, who tell me that I actually really became mature around age 40. Start acting like an adult. Now, I hope I start acting like an adult earlier than that, but there is this process that brain maturation is a continuum that goes on for a long period of time. There are windows of intense susceptibility in adolescence. That alone is a reason to think about significant regulation. But we have a lot to learn, a lot to try to understand, and understand what particular windows lead to susceptibility to particular types of abuse. I mean, we've talked about a continuum of addictions, but all of them aren't necessarily going to have the same, what we might call the ability to grab an individual and pull them in. Nicotine, for instance, was a compound that has an incredible rate of inducing addiction. We don't know how gambling relates to that. How does it relate to the other compounds? Inhalants are at the lowest end, nicotine at the high end. Where does gambling come in? We don't know, okay? And we don't know what that means in the context also of development. At 12, is that the same as at 16, as at 20, as at 24? I mean, there's a whole bunch of things we really need to learn so we can be smart about this.